All right, well, welcome to Laketon Bethel, folks. Welcome to our video audience. Good to have you with us. If you want to know more about Laketon Bethel, or if you want to support the church financially, you can go to our website. It's simply laketonbethel.org, and you'll find out all kinds of things from there. My name is Sherwin. I'm the pastor here, and it's good to have you with us. And, of course, happy Father's Day. Now, today, I'm going to talk about why I'm an abnormal pastor, because I just figured, folks need to know that. I am kind of a misfit in terms of pastors. For years, I tried to hide that, and gradually I've let my guard down. But in the old days when I was looking for a different job, when I wanted to find a different church or whatever, first thing I'd do is I'd get my hair cut short, shave my beard off, and start wearing a tie, because I wanted to, play the game that needed to be played. And I was just never very good at it. It's hard to fit the image of people that they have of being a pastor when you have every song the Rolling Stones have ever recorded. That just seems to be a conflict. And, I talked about that before, about how, just being a misfit in different things. But my parents, they wanted me to be something like Ronald Reagan, and on the left there. It's fun to say Reagan on the left. And then I turned out more like the guy on the right, Keith Richards. He was more of a role model to me than that. And I just can't do things the traditional way. I never could. I mean, I did make a video in a cornfield by Sioux Center with 2,000 pigs in the background. It does happen. And, I like the image of being the fat old hippie pastor who plays with his grandkids. It's just fun to do. Now, the picture on the right there, she wanted to watch a video. And the videos they make for 3-year-olds these days are so incredibly boring that I kept falling asleep, and then I'd start snoring, and she'd grab my nose and twist it. But that was just kind of fun. It's very unpastoral. I can't be normal, folks, and that has worked in my favor. Diane said many times that she would have never married me if I was normal. I don't know what that means, but it has worked in my favor. It is a compliment, though, because I don't want to be a traditional pastor. I want to teach people the Bible and let them decide what they're going to do with that teaching. And I like to pray with people. But you know what I've learned? I don't think it's God's will for any of us to be normal, especially in these days. Plus, it's much more fun to be abnormal. And we're all a little abnormal around here. This is not a typical church. I mean, look at our first core value of acceptance. Accept anyone, no matter who they are, what they're doing, what they've done. Well, that flies right in the face of what most churches believe. We have an emphasis on biblical scholarship. You all hired me, and I'm a complete Bible nerd. If there's something about the Bible that can be known, I want to know it. And then we have the connections thing, where we try to connect with each other and with Jesus with everything that we do. When we focus on those things, it makes us a very unusual church. When we focus on the good we can do for the community and for each other, it makes us an unusual church. If we go around being a blessing to people, it makes us an unusual church. Tongue-tied there. If we put the emphasis on loving and serving, that makes us a weird church. We are perfect misfits. We're not normal. And that's commanded by Scripture. Romans chapter 12, one of the great chapters of the New Testament, says this: "And so, dear brothers and sisters, I plead with you to give your bodies to God because of all He's done for you. Let them be a living and holy sacrifice, the kind He will find acceptable. This is truly the way to worship Him." this whole thing of giving your bodies to God, that's where one of the reasons the Catholic Church is into the whole celibacy thing and all that. That's not what it means. The word for bodies there, the Greek word is somata, and it means yourself, to offer yourself as a living sacrifice. The New Living Translation was a little too literal there, because that's what it really means, is to offer yourself completely. Offer yourself in gratitude to the giver of life. Hence, a living and holy sacrifice. You remember in Rome at the time, the letter that Paul was writing to these folks, half of the people approximately were of Jewish background, and the other half were of Greek background, Greco-Roman background. So the Jews had an idea in their heads when Paul talked about sacrifice that I think you need to know about. The Jewish sacrificial system had all kinds of rules, and you could not sacrifice an animal that was damaged, preferably a male animal, and the animal could not be neutered. That was not an acceptable thing, could not be changed in any way. And it had to be a kosher animal, one that you could eat, based on Jewish laws. So these were the sacrifices that were made. And, at that time, when Paul wrote Romans, the temple was still standing. The Roman government tore it down in AD 70. So that means that Romans had to have been written before that, because he doesn't mention it. And when the temple was torn down, the animal sacrifice stopped. The only remnant we have of that is if you ever attend a Jewish wedding, at the end of the wedding, they wrap a glass up in a towel and step on it and smash it. That's to remind themselves that the temple has been destroyed. That tradition has stayed with them that long. But what would happen in the temple, like say you wanted to have a particular sin forgiven or something, and they wrapped a whole lot of mythology around that, you would go in and say you were going to sacrifice a young male goat. And so you'd go in, you had to be male yourself, because women couldn't do that. That was their thing in that day. And the priest would bless the sacrifice, and then they had a very humane way of slaughtering the animal. They just did a little poke in the jugular vein, and the animal bled out. Now, this is kind of gory, but it's how things worked, and I want you to understand that. The person who brought the sacrifice in had to lay his hands on the animal as it was dying, as a reminder that the only way for sins to be forgiven was through death. That's not true, but that's what they believed. And so they went through that whole thing. That's what the people would have had in mind, the Jewish people, the Jewish half of the church in Rome, would have popped into their heads when Paul said, be a living sacrifice. They would have all experienced that sort of thing. Now the pagans, the folks that were not Jewish, that were part of the early church, also knew about a sacrificial system. If you go to Rome today, the Parthenon, all these big buildings that are now churches were once pagan temples. Lots of them were. And they had sacrifices too, but they could sacrifice pigs and crows and whatnot, unkosher animals. But what they would do, they'd have a lot of fanfare, and quite often an ox was sacrificed. And they would do that, and throw the blood around on each other for blessings and all that sort of thing. And then they would cook the animal, kind of have a community barbecue. And any meat that was left over was then sold as a fundraiser for the temple. So everybody that Paul was writing to here had animal sacrifice as a normal thing. It's designed to appease an angry God with death. So like maybe God will be less ticked off at us if we kill some animals in his name. It's a ridiculous concept, but it's what they believed in those days. Here's the kicker for Paul. Living sacrifices are not dead sacrifices. You're called to be a living sacrifice, willingly give everything to him. He says those are the acceptable sacrifices, the true way to worship. Not with blood, but with service. Reporting for duty, being a living sacrifice. So he goes on and says this. Don't copy the behavior and customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. So he's saying, don't copy the world. Don't worry about making fashion statements to impress people. Having just come from Sioux Center, I always joke about that, how the farmers complain about how broke they are as they're driving their $60,000 pickups. But there they are, they spend all this money to look cool and pull up to a stoplight. And there are 3 stoplights in my hometown now. Just to impress somebody they don't know. We don't need these fashion statements to impress people. We don't have to try for significance the way the world wants us to, trying to be important all the time. We can avoid the me big, you little syndrome of trying to dominate other people. Instead, Paul is rightly explaining we need to become a servant like Jesus was. Instead of clawing your way to the top, become a servant to those who are at the bottom. See, God wants us to be misfits. He wants us to be different than the rest of the world. And we get that by changing the way we think. The world will tell you it's all about me. If you watch television ads, it's all about your comfort and your prestige. Take this little pill and everybody in your life will be smiling. And especially your insurance company, because the stuff that's advertised isn't covered, But it's the way it is. Take this little pill or drive this certain car or whatever. The world says it's all about me. God says, no, it's not. It's about those God puts in your path that need the help. Now, I neglected to put the ending of this verse up here as an oversight. But Paul goes, if you do this, then you will know what God's will is for you, which is good and pleasing and perfect. See, God's will is obvious. You're here to help. You're here to be the presence of Jesus right where you are. It's not an accident that you're a part of this church. It's not an accident that the people that are in your life are in your life. Your charge is, as I say every Sunday in the benediction, to be a representative of Jesus to the people that he sends your way. So you have to change the way you think. And it's really interesting. The world says, grab all you can. Jesus says, help all you can. That means leave your neighborhood better than you found it. Leave your workplace better than you found it. Leave Muskegon better than you found it. Leave this church better than you found it. And I don't want you to leave the church, but when you go home, you know what I mean. Change your thinking from it's all about me to it's all about those that Jesus sends my way. So I've got a few take-homes for you today that I want to show you. The first one is, obviously from this passage, offer yourself as a living sacrifice. For me, the whole idea of first thing in the morning, report for duty. What do you want me to do today? And then look for ways to help. And then avoid taking credit for that help. Find things to do that'll give you no personal gains. Just ask God, what do you want me to do today? And he'll let you know. Ask how I can help, and he'll show you. The second thing that we get from this passage is don't copy the customs of this world. So many folks never make it past a middle school mentality. You remember what middle school was like? You had to have your clothes just so and all that. I'd forgotten it, but I remember middle school. When I was in middle school, it was fashionable to wear these plaid slacks, so there I was. I actually had pants that was yellow and red with big print on it. I wouldn't wash my car with that today, but that's, because it was so important what other people thought. Thank goodness we can grow out of that. When my daughter was in middle school, she spent about 30 minutes every day in front of the mirror making sure that her hair was just right. And then she had to deal with me who, I comb my hair once a month or so. She couldn't understand that. But we grow past that. And then we ask the question, how can I serve? Because we realize it's not about me. The world teaches that it's all about living a comfortable life. Jesus teaches us that it's all about making things more comfortable for others. And then the third thing is to change the way you think. Instead of thinking about how much you're going to benefit from what you're doing, what you're going to get out of it, think about being a blessing to someone else. Instead of thinking about what you can get out of it, think about how you can serve. And there's some practical examples of this. Being said it's Father's Day today, I should talk about parenting. And I occasionally have these nights where I can't sleep, so I get up and watch reruns. And I was watching The Sopranos the other night. Now, I like that show. It's, for those of you who haven't seen it, it's about a New Jersey mobster who has anxiety attacks and goes to see a shrink. And it's hilarious, the relationship between him and his shrink. And, it's good for a laugh. But in the first few shows, you get to meet this gangster's mother. And man, is she a piece of work. That character that she plays is a complete burden, high demand. She manipulates her kids and everybody else with guilt trips. And at one point, the gangster tells his shrink, she just exists, and the only thing she takes pleasure in is making other people miserable. It's all about this is what she looks like in the show. And not someone you're going to take out to lunch. But that's what she did. Now, the sad part is I've seen this in real life many times, where people are manipulative and really only take pleasure in how miserable they can make things for other people, how they can do things for themselves. I think that's bad parenting. Good parenting says you go to your kids and let them know that you're a resource for them, not a burden. And, you take care of yourself so that nobody else needs to take care of you. I always try to convince people to be an asset to their kids, not a liability. And it's the same way with marriage. I've had countless hours of training in this, and I've got a whole lot of experience in it. But it's really a simple thing, You treat your spouse the same way as you treat your kids there. You say, how can I serve you? What can I do for you? How can I serve you rather than get my needs met? And when I tell people that, their marriages turn around. So I've been putting it in wedding messages lately. I tell people, you're getting married here. You have a new calling in life. How can I make life better for this person that I'm marrying? Because it's not about me. Every day you ask, what can I do for you? And they'll tell you. But you ask that rather than, what can you do for me? This whole idea of Jesus, of loving and serving, is the secret to most things. And I encourage you to make that a mantra in your life. Now, as a church, we're doing pretty good with that, and we're getting better. You know, what we're currently doing, we've done the food truck for several years. John, you said over 1 million pounds of food that has gone through here?
Yeah, Jill's working on the next million.
Jill's working on the next million. All right. And some of us are getting involved in the kids' food basket. So you don't have to serve people, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. There's organizations already there, we can support them. But this is a good thing, feeds hungry kids. We're already deeply involved in hand-to-hand. You know, we take care of over 200 kids, provide food for them on weekends, the kids that are malnourished. It's a cool thing to participate in. We met with those folks, and they're so pleased with Laketon Bethel, and especially the fact that several of the board members work as volunteers in the program. They hadn't seen that as much before. These are good things to do. We are covering 3 elementary schools right now, and the demand isn't going to go away. But Jesus commands us to provide food and shelter and clothing for those who can't do it on their own. And we've had clothing drives, and we can have more of them. We can get involved with Habitat for Humanity that builds houses for people that can't afford them. See, the problem that churches have had, and I think we're paying the piper on this now, is that churches for years have tried to provide entertainment for people. And that is where the church has really messed up. I was having a conversation with Robert Schuller one time. It was a one-on-one conversation because I got him from the airport. I was driving a ratty old Ford pickup at the time. It was so much fun to throw his suitcase in the back of that ratty old pickup. But I asked him if he was nervous about the presentation he had to make that night. It was to the Regional Synod of the West. And he said, no, he wasn't, but he was on his best behavior. What in the world? He goes, yeah, you know, it's show business. And I wanted to throw up. I really liked the guy, but I sunk when I heard that. And I've heard other large congregation pastors say the same thing. Outreach is not providing entertainment. Outreach is serving the community. That's what we're called to do. And we can do better on some things. You know, the church for years has spent lots of money entertaining children, trying to get these flashy youth programs going. Kids all look at them and go, but we've tried. If we had taught the kids to serve instead of teaching them that the church exists to entertain them, I'll bet we'd have a lot better retention rate. But many churches are not ready to go that route yet. They're still hiring comedians and whatnot to entertain children. We used to have dodgeball here, and it filled that gym up. And there's nothing wrong with dodgeball, but it doesn't fulfill the mission of the church. Not at all. And we've done the same thing with adults. We've tried to entertain adults, making the church into another kind of show business instead of teaching people how to serve. And that, I believe, is why God is pruning the church down these days, because we need to return to what he has called us to do. And besides, churches aren't very good at providing entertainment. As one 20-something guy told me, he says, yeah, have you heard they invented this thing called the internet? We can get way better entertainment there. And that's true. So one of the things that I've asked the board here, and I'm going to ask all of you this, is what if Laketon Bethel closed? Would anyone miss us outside of those who are in here? Would the community ever miss us? And are we making a difference? You know, we're called to do this, to love and to serve. Are we doing it? You know, every Sunday for the last 15, 20 years, I conclude the service with a benediction from Colossians 3:17 that says, we're representatives of Jesus. It's what we're called to do. And everything we do or say. Well, if we are the representatives of Jesus, we're going to make a huge difference in this community. If we find and follow God's perfect will, we're not going to have to worry about that because we will be his representatives. It's tremendously liberating to know that the church doesn't need to be an entertainment place. We don't have to do that sort of thing. We don't have to keep up with the church down the road who's got a better entertainment program than we have. We're not called to do that. We're called to serve. And this isn't my last Sunday. My physician says I'm healthy. But guess what, folks? As long as I've got breath in this body, I'm going to be trying to push this place to be that kind of church that loves and serves. So I'm just giving you a warning if you're not into that. You know, you're going to be uncomfortable. That's what we're called to do. Let's pray together. Lord, you have given us this unique opportunity of service, and we don't know how many days you've left, how many more days you're going to give us. But we do know that you called us to love and to serve. And that's who we want to be. So bless us in that effort. Amen. Now, to our video audience, thanks for tuning in. As always, we'll be back next week.